Hey guys, tonight we descend into the earth, not metaphorically, but actually, down a shaft so narrow you have to turn your shoulders sideways just to slip through. Your torch crackles, throwing soft, honey-colored light over rock walls slick with centuries of touch. The air tastes faintly of dust, and there's this low hum you can't quite place. Might be the wind far above, might be your heartbeat. Or, knowing our luck, some geological surprise waiting to cave in. You probably won't survive this if the ladder gives way. But hey, that's half the fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you right now? And what's your local time? Now put on your headphones, or turn down the music. Maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music. And let's take a journey back to ancient times in the most authentic way possible. Your boots scrape against wooden rungs that were already old when the pyramids were young. You can almost hear the echo of pickaxes from millennia past. Ancient miners here chipped away with stone tools. Historians still argue whether they were seeking copper, turquoise, or something more ceremonial. The walls are streaked with mineral veins like frozen lightning bolts, and in the dim light, they shimmer as if holding their breath. Somewhere in the darkness below, water drips in slow, deliberate intervals, like the Earth's own clock ticking down. A mouse scurries past your boot, or maybe it's not a mouse. The creature has these oversized eyes and fur the color of the stone dust. It's perfectly adapted to a world without sunlight. You try not to think about how many other unseen residents are watching you. The shaft widens, and suddenly you're standing in a cavern carved by human hands into something almost geometric. The walls bear chisel marks that haven't dulled with age. There's a smell, dry, metallic, with a faint tang of something organic, like dried herbs. Some archaeologists think miners would burn certain plants underground, both for light and to keep away. Well, let's just call them pests, and leave it at that. The fringe theory? That smoke was meant to keep away spirits. You know, just in case. You run your fingers over a groove in the wall, deep enough to fit your palm. It's part of a spiral carved into the stone, leading toward a small alcove. Inside is a cracked clay jar, half filled with powder. Salt? Sand? No, it's crushed malachite, green as summer leaves. You imagine the miner's face, streaked with sweat and lit by fire, as they worked for hours in air that grew thinner with every breath. The floor crunches beneath you. Not rock, bone. Tiny, brittle pieces, scattered like forgotten crumbs. Bird bones, maybe? But why would birds be down here? Unless they were brought for a purpose. Messengers, food, or even, as one weird fringe journal suggests, song offerings to please the underground gods. It's absurd. But standing here, you can't dismiss it entirely. Your torchlight catches on something ahead, a line of shallow bowls carved right into the stone floor. Each one still holds a small mound of blackened residue. Charcoal, fires that burned here long before steel or even bronze was common. You crouch to examine them, and almost topple forward when a warm draft brushes your cheek. That's impossible. There's no wind down here. Unless there's a hidden shaft or something moving deeper in the dark. You follow the warmth, ducking under a low overhang where the rock forces you to your knees. The sound of dripping water grows louder, but it's joined by something else, a faint ringing, like metal struck far away. Could be water hitting stone, could be a hallucination from breathing this stale air. Your brain quietly offers the possibility of ghosts, because it's helpful like that. When you emerge, you're in a dome-shaped chamber. The ceiling rises high enough for your torchlight to fade before it reaches the top. Stalactites hang like stone icicles, each one catching the glow and returning it in muted golds and silvers. You remember that in ancient Egypt, miners would sometimes leave offerings before starting work, fearing collapse or worse. Maybe this was such a place. At the chamber's center is a pile of stones, deliberately stacked. They're not native to this part of the mine. Someone carried them down here, piece by piece, perhaps as a marker or memorial. You circle the pile and notice a narrow crack in the wall, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. It's the kind of gap you'd only find if you were looking for it, or if something inside wanted you to find it. The air here is cooler, and there's a low, pulsing sound, almost below the threshold of hearing. A step closer, and the rock beneath your boot shifts, only slightly, but enough to send a jolt up your spine. You steady yourself, the torchlight flickering as if uncertain whether to keep burning. You glance back at the ladder, a distant smudge of shadow far behind you. Climbing back out would be sensible, but sensible doesn't get you the wonders beneath the earth. You take a breath that tastes of ancient dust and step into the crack, letting the dark swallow you whole. The crack swallows you in a way that feels deliberate, the walls tightening around your shoulders, then releasing into a long, sloping corridor of sandstone. Your torchlight dances over the surface, revealing faint horizontal lines, tool marks from hands that shaped this space thousands of years ago. Some strokes are neat and measured, others hurried, as if the workers were racing against something unseen. Historians still argue whether this underground complex beneath the desert was a planned city or a last-minute refuge during some catastrophe. Either way, it feels less like you're walking into a ruin and more like you're trespassing in a place that never quite stopped existing. The air here is still, but warmer than in the mine. You catch a hint of spice, maybe cinnamon? Though it could just be your mind filling in ghosts of ancient markets. Ahead, the corridor opens into a vast hall where the ceiling arches high, supported by sandstone pillars carved with repeating geometric patterns. Some are precise triangles, others swirling spirals that seem to shift if you stare too long. You step forward, boots scuffing a floor polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. The sound echoes, hollow and strangely musical. Once these halls were bustling, traders selling woven baskets, bakers offering flatbread steaming from underground ovens. Imagine standing here when the air was thick with voices, haggling over the price of dried figs. Today, only your own breath and the faint drip of water break the silence. To your left, a small alcove holds a low stone bench. Above it, etched into the wall, is a scene. Two human figures, carrying an enormous fish between them. The fish's eyes are inlaid with something reflective, perhaps obsidian or polished jet. The carving is so crisp, you half expect the fish to twitch. A quirky theory from an old archaeology journal claims this wasn't a fish at all, but a symbolic map of an underground waterway. Practical explanation? Ancient people liked big dinners. A shaft of faint light cuts across the floor, spilling from somewhere high above. You tilt your head until you spot it. A narrow slit carved through the rock, channeling sunlight down into the heart of this subterranean city. Ingenious ancient engineering, and possibly also a security risk if you happen to be trying to hide an entire city from raiders. Beyond the central hall, narrow streets snake between chambers carved into the sandstone. You walk past one where shelves are cut directly into the walls, each niche holding fragments of pottery. their painted patterns still visible under a layer of fine dust. Another chamber contains a circular fire pit, blackened and cracked, with charred wood still in place. Carbon dating once revealed it hadn't been touched in over 1,500 years. Somewhere in the darkness, a pebble skitters, though your torchlight catches nothing moving. You make a mental note not to think about rats the size of small dogs. Duck into what must have been a marketplace stall. The counter is a single slab of stone, worn down at the edges where countless hands must have leaned. Behind it, on the wall, is a shallow recess lined with smooth plaster. The plaster is painted with faded images, a bird, a crescent moon, and something that looks suspiciously like a loaf of bread wearing a crown. Historians still can't agree whether these were symbols of trade, religious emblems, or just a particularly creative baker's logo. Further in, the streets become narrower, the ceilings lower. The air smells different, less dry, more mineral-rich, as if the rock here sweats in the heat. You trail your fingers along the wall and feel a shallow groove running the length of the passage. Follow it, and you find it leads to a square stone basin set into the floor. A trickle of water drips from a crack above, filling the basin so slowly you can barely see it rise. You lean closer, and the surface ripples. Not from your movement, but from a steady tremor in the stone beneath you. An underground spring, maybe, or something else shifting far below. You continue along the groove until the passage ends in a small, round chamber. The walls here are carved with rows of repeating handprints, hundreds of them, each pressed into the sandstone, as if the builders wanted to leave their mark for eternity. Some are the size of a child's palm, others are broad and long-fingered. The fringe theory? These weren't all human hands. You feel the hair on your arms rise, but tell yourself it's just the cooler air. At the far side of the chamber is a doorway without a door, leading into a stairway that spirals downward. The steps are shallow but uneven, worn into soft curves from use. Your torchlight doesn't reach the bottom, but you hear something. A soft, rhythmic tapping. You pause, counting the beats. It's slow, deliberate, and stops the moment you stop moving. Halfway down, you find a carved lintel above the stairs. Its design is intricate, interlocking loops, small animal figures, and what appears to be a human face with its mouth open in a perfect O. Whether it's singing, screaming, or yawning is up for debate. And yes, you briefly yawn back, because apparently you're polite to thousand-year-old art. When you finally step off the last stair, you find yourself in another broad corridor. But this one is darker. The walls undecorated, except for the occasional chisel mark. The air is heavier here, with a subtle vibration underfoot. Somewhere far ahead, the tapping starts again, this time accompanied by a faint splash, as if something large just moved through shallow water. You grip your torch tighter. The city above you is long gone, swallowed by desert sands. But here, under the earth, something still remembers it. You follow the dark corridor until it opens into a space that doesn't feel man-made at all. At least, not at first. The air changes here, cooler and faintly sweet, like moss after rain. Your torchlight catches a network of thick roots pushing through cracks in the ceiling and walls, curling down like petrified waterfalls. They twist together in places, forming natural arches you have to duck beneath. Somewhere above, a mountain rises, and at its peak, if the stories are true, there's a temple so old that even the local myths can't agree who built it. You push past a curtain of roots, the fibers whispering against your shoulders, and enter a chamber where human work and nature have fused. The walls are carved into deep niches, each holding a stone figure. Some are human-shaped, others animal, and a few look like they were sculpted by someone who had never actually seen an animal, just heard about one secondhand. Historians still argue whether this place was a storage crypt for sacred idols or a secret chapel for temple priests. The floor under your boots is smooth, worn almost concave in the center, as if generations of feet circled here during ceremonies. You can almost hear the echo of low chanting, the rhythm of bare heels against stone. A faint scent of incense lingers, impossible after so many centuries, yet undeniable, like someone has just passed through and left the smoke behind. In the center of the chamber stands a squat altar made of greenish stone. Its surface is grooved, leading to a small hole that disappears into the floor. Officially, this was probably for pouring libations. Unofficially, some fringe archaeologists insist it was a drainage system for blood. You decide not to kneel too close. A shaft of dim light slants in from a hole high in the wall. Dust motes drift lazily through it, catching in your torch's glow like tiny golden fish. You angle the beam upward and see more roots threading down toward the altar, their tips brushing the groove as if searching for water. Or something else. You edge around the altar toward an archway on the far side. Here, the carvings become more elaborate. Vines, flowers, and figures holding what look like stylized flames. One panel shows a figure standing beneath the mountain, arms raised, while from above, long tendrils, roots, lightning, divine spaghetti, descend to touch their head. Quirky tidbit. One 19th century explorer swore this image was proof of ancient electrical technology. Modern scholars mostly roll their eyes, but the panel does have an oddly modern feel, like an ancient comic strip mid-cliffhanger. The passage beyond slopes down, and the roots get thicker, their bark gnarled and ridged like the wrinkles of an elder's hand. Your torchlight picks out clusters of pale fungi sprouting from them, glowing faintly blue. They're beautiful, but you resist the urge to touch. Glowing things underground are rarely on your side. The slope levels out into a smaller chamber, almost round, with a ceiling so low you have to stoop. The roots here knit together in a tangled mat overhead, and from it hang hundreds of thin, dried strips. Leaves, perhaps, though they crumble at the faintest breath. In the center of the room, a small stone pool holds water so clear it seems like glass. You kneel and peer in. At first, it's your own reflection, smudged by flickering torchlight, but then you notice shapes in the depths. Tiny carved figurines rest at the bottom, each wrapped in what looks like fabric, now little more than threads. They're all facing upward, toward the surface, as if waiting for something to come down. Historians still debate whether this was a wishing pool, a burial for small idols, or simply a place where offerings were left to feed the tree above. Something plops into the water. You jerk back, torch flaring against the roots. The ripples spread, but nothing surfaces. No stone falling from above. No fish. Nothing. The pool calms, glassy again, but you find yourself taking a step away. On the far wall, half hidden by dangling roots, is a doorway. The lintel stone bears a shallow carving, a mountain outline, with a hollow beneath it like a cave, and inside that, a small dot. The simplest of maps. You step through and find yourself in a long, straight tunnel lined with more stone figures. These are different, taller, more abstract, their faces featureless, but somehow aware. As you pass, you feel the faintest vibration through the stone floor, as though the mountain above is breathing. The tunnel ends in a set of steps, spiraling upward. Your torchlight glints off metal rings hammered into the walls at intervals, perhaps for holding lamps, perhaps for something more practical, like tying off ropes during processions. You climb, your boots tapping out a slow rhythm until you reach a landing. Ahead is a heavy slab of stone, its edges framed by thick roots, as if the mountain's heart is trying to reclaim it. You push. It doesn't budge. You try again, and with a low groan, it shifts just enough for a sliver of cooler air to slip through. You squeeze past, emerging into another chamber. Here, the carvings explode into complexity, scenes of harvest, war, feasts, and sky-gazing. At the far end stands a figure twice your height, carved from the same greenish stone as the altar below. Its eyes are polished crystal, and for a moment, in the flicker of your torch, they seem to catch the light and hold it. Somewhere in the quiet, something drips. Once. Twice. Then stops. You don't see another exit, but you have the distinct feeling you're not alone in this room. You hold still, letting the quiet press in. The chamber smells faintly of damp stone and something mineral sweet, almost like the air in a pottery kiln after it's cooled. Your torch throws shadows up the statue's tall frame, making its carved robe ripple like it's breathing. You take a step back, not out of fear exactly, more out of that instinct you get when you've stumbled into someone else's living room without knocking. There's a narrow gap behind the statue, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. You turn, shoulder-scraping cool stone, and emerge into a passage that immediately curves downward. The air grows warmer, richer, and you begin to hear the unmistakable hollow sound of open space ahead. Your torchlight spills into a cavern so vast that the ceiling disappears into darkness. And then you see them. The walls are alive with beasts, not in the, oh no, they're moving way, though give your brain a moment, and it might decide otherwise, but painted in ochre, charcoal, and white. Massive bison with fur, rendered in delicate strokes. Deer mid-leap. A great cat poised as if ready to spring. Some animals have been outlined in black and filled with swirls of red and yellow, the pigments made from crushed minerals mixed with fat or blood. Historians still argue whether these were purely ceremonial, teaching tools for hunters, or some kind of magical insurance policy to ensure the real animals would return each season. The floor crunches underfoot. Looking down, you realize you're walking on a thin layer of something pale and brittle. Crushed shells, perhaps, or flakes of calcite fallen from the cavern roof. In the torchlight, they glitter faintly, as if you're treading on frost. To your right, a section of wall is covered in handprints, dozens of them, some red, some black, some negative outlines made by blowing pigment around a pressed hand. Among the human ones, you spot smaller, narrower shapes, maybe children's hands, maybe something else entirely. A quirky fringe theory claims these prints were made by shamans in animal hide gloves to represent spirit helpers. You decide not to measure your own hand against them. As you walk, the animals seem to follow. The positioning is deliberate, painted so their eyes meet yours from almost every angle. Your torch flickers, and in that instant, the stag's painted shadow leaps just a little farther along the wall. You shake your head and remind yourself that pareidolia is a thing. But still, maybe hold the torch a little steadier. The path narrows, leading you along a ledge that skirts a deep pit in the cavern floor. You kneel, angling the torch downward. The bottom is hidden in darkness, but the air rising from it is warmer, carrying with it a faint smell of wet clay and something organic, earth, roots, maybe even the ghost of an ancient campfire. Somewhere far below, water drips steadily. On the other side of the ledge, the paintings change. Here the animals are stranger. Elongated limbs, exaggerated eyes, and markings that spiral over their bodies in patterns that don't match any known species. Historians still debate whether these were mythic creatures, distorted memories of now extinct animals, or simply the result of artistic license. One bison-like figure has 6 legs. Another appears to have wings. You can't help but think that if these were spirit guides, you'd prefer to meet them in paint rather than in person. In a smaller alcove, you find a low stone shelf where someone arranged smooth river stones in a perfect circle. In the center lies a lump of red pigment, cracked and dry, with a faint thumbprint still visible. You can almost imagine the artist, pausing here to grind the stone, test the color, and leave that accidental mark for you to find thousands of years later. You follow the wall until it leads to a narrow crevice. The paintings stop abruptly here, as if whoever made them decided this was the boundary. The rock beyond is unadorned, rough, and cold to the touch. You step through anyway. The crevice opens into a smaller chamber with a low ceiling, so low you have to hunch. Here, the walls are not painted, but carved. Grooves depict hunting scenes, people with bows and spears, animals fleeing or falling. The carvings are shallow, but precise, and in the flickering light, the figures seem to move, not with the illusion of paint, but with the shifting of shadow and depth. At the center of this chamber, the floor dips into a shallow basin. The bottom is covered in a thin layer of fine, dark powder. You stir it gently with your boot and catch the metallic scent of ground hematite. It stains your soul a dull red, like dried blood. A fringe hypothesis suggests that participants in ceremonies here would coat their feet or hands in this powder before stepping back into the painted cavern, merging themselves with the animals in the art. Somewhere behind you, a pebble skitters. The sound is soft, almost apologetic, but it's enough to make you turn. The crevice is empty, only the dim glow of your torchlight spilling back into the painted hall. You remind yourself that caves are full of shifting stones, falling flakes, and small creatures minding their own business. And yet, as you make your way back along the ledge, the painted eyes seem just a fraction sharper than before, like they've been paying attention. At the far end of the cavern, another tunnel waits, low, narrow, and cut deeper into the earth. It swallows the last of the painted light as you step forward, the walls now bare and damp. You can hear it again, that slow, deliberate drip. Only now, it's joined by something else. A distant, steady rumble, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. The rumble grows louder as you move deeper, the tunnel sloping steadily downward until the air feels heavier, wetter. Your boots splash in shallow puddles, each step sending ripples across water that hasn't seen daylight in millennia. The ceiling drops low enough for you to graze it with your fingertips, smooth limestone, slick with condensation. The tunnel suddenly widens, and before you lies a river that never meets the sun. Its surface is black, glassy, reflecting only the faintest torchlight. The water is perfectly still, except for a slow, lazy current that pulls toward the darkness beyond your reach. You crouch to touch it. The cold shocks your fingers, sharp and almost metallic in taste when you bring the droplets to your lips. Historians still argue whether this river was naturally formed or engineered as part of an ancient water system. Either way, it feels alive. A narrow, flat-bottomed boat rests at the water's edge, carved from a single tree trunk. The wood is swollen and darkened with age, but somehow intact. A fringe theory claims ancient people left boats like this deliberately, believing travelers could use them to cross into the underworld, metaphorically or otherwise. You hesitate for only a moment before pushing it into the water. The boat rocks under your weight, water lapping quietly at the sides. You use a long pole lying inside to push off from the bank. The current takes over almost immediately, carrying you forward at a slow but certain pace. Your torchlight dances over the walls, revealing jagged limestone formations that glitter faintly where mineral deposits catch the light. You pass beneath a low arch where the rock hangs so close you could kiss it, though that's probably a bad idea in a place where things drip unidentifiable fluids from above. Beyond the arch, the ceiling soars upward again, revealing stalactites that look like stone chandeliers. Drops fall from their tips into the river, each plink amplified by the cavern into a sound like a distant bell. At one point, you notice the walls on either side are etched, not with images, but with straight, deliberate lines. Some run parallel to the water. Others intersect in angles too precise to be random. Historians still debate whether these are early surveyors' marks, records of water levels, or part of a symbolic map. You trace one with your pole and feel the groove extend deeper than it appears, as though it's been worn smooth by countless touches. The river narrows, and the current speeds up just enough to make the boat sway. You pass through a stretch where the walls pinch close on either side, the rock mottled with patches of white and green, lichen that somehow survives without sunlight. A pale, eyeless fish darts from the shadows, its movements quick and deliberate. Another follows, and another, until a small school glides alongside you. They seem curious rather than afraid, their scales catching the torchlight like tarnished silver. The current slows again, and you drift into a cavern so vast your torch can't find the far wall. The ceiling disappears into darkness, but the echoes of dripping water tell you it's high above. Here the river widens, forming an underground lake. In the center, a column of rock rises from the water, like the spine of some ancient creature. At its base, faint carvings catch your eye. Circles, wavy lines, and what might be stylized fish. A quirky tidbit from an old expedition report claims that divers once found offerings wedged into cracks in the column. Beads, clay figurines, and even the preserved husk of a pomegranate. You angle the boat toward the far shore, where a faint glow seeps from a narrow opening in the rock. As you approach, the air shifts, warmer, carrying the scent of minerals and something faintly sulfurous. The glow brightens until you realize it's not sunlight at all, but a reflection. Your torchlight bouncing off a wall crusted with crystalline formations. They sparkle in shifting colors, amber, gold, and flashes of blue, like the inside of a geode cracked open. The opening leads to a smaller, winding channel. Here, the water runs shallow enough that your pole strikes the bottom with each push. The walls press close again, and you can hear the river murmuring against the rock, the sound almost like a whisper. You lean in to listen, knowing full well it's just the acoustics, but still straining to catch a word or two. The channel ends abruptly in a small cavern with a rocky shore. You pull the boat up and step onto the gravel, the crunch under your boots loud after so long on water. Ahead, a narrow stairway is carved directly into the rock, slick with moss and worn to shallow curves by countless feet. The walls here are different, pocked and rippled as though water once flowed through but retreated centuries ago. As you climb, the sound of the river fades, replaced by a distant, steady thrum. It's not the rumble of water or the creak of shifting stone. It's deeper, resonating in your bones like the slow beat of something enormous. You pause, listening. It continues, unbothered by your presence. At the top of the stairs, you find another passage leading forward. The air is warmer still, and the rock takes on a faint reddish hue. Whatever lies ahead, it's not part of the river's quiet domain anymore. You glance back once, the black water just visible through the narrow opening, perfectly still again, as if it never moved at all. The reddish tint deepens as you move forward, the air thickening with a faint mineral tang that coats the back of your throat. The walls glisten where moisture seeps through, but here it's not just water. There's a faint crystalline sheen, like sugar clinging to the sides of a glass. Your torchlight scatters across countless tiny faces of salt, and suddenly, the tunnel opens into a chamber so bright, it's as if you've stepped into the belly of a frozen storm. The walls, ceiling, and floor are sheathed in salt crystals, some small as grains of sand, others the size of your palm. They crunch faintly under your boots with each step. The air is drier here, almost sharp, and every breath leaves a faint taste of the sea. Historians still argue whether this place was naturally formed by an ancient inland sea retreating underground, or deliberately mined for its preservative treasure. Near the center of the chamber, half buried under a mound of salt, lies something that doesn't belong. A wooden chest, its edges rounded by centuries of mineral growth. You kneel, brushing crystals away until your fingers find iron fittings, corroded but still holding. The lid creaks open reluctantly, revealing a jumble of objects, woven reed baskets hardened into brittle shells, a small bronze mirror dulled to green, and scraps of cloth stiffened by salt. One piece still bears a faint embroidered pattern, swirling lines that might be waves or clouds. A quirky tidbit from a recent dig in another salt cavern. Researchers found a perfectly preserved loaf of bread, still intact after over 2,000 years. Here, you almost expect to uncover a similar absurdity. A piece of fruit, a fish, something equally stubborn in its survival. But instead, tucked into the corner of the chest, you find a tiny clay figurine, no more than 2 inches tall. Its features are worn, but it seems to be holding something. A jar, perhaps, or a scroll. You set it back gently, unsure if disturbing it further is wise. The chamber narrows into a hallway, where salt curtains hang from the ceiling in delicate fringes, each one dripping slowly into small pools below. The pools are perfectly round, their surfaces shimmering under your torch. You lean over one and catch your reflection warped in the water's surface, your face stretched and flickering like a memory, refusing to stay still. Further on, the air grows warmer again, and you hear the faint rustle of something shifting ahead. The hallway opens into a second chamber, larger than the first, its walls smoother, almost sculpted. Here, the salt is tinted pink and amber in places, forming swirling patterns like frozen fire. In the center, raised slightly above the floor, is a stone slab. Upon it rests what appears to be a bundle, wrapped in thick cloth, bound with a braid of plant fiber. The salt has crept over it like frost on a window, sealing it in place. Historians still debate what these bundles represent: burials, offerings, or ceremonial storage of important items. You crouch, brushing the crust away from one corner, and the fabric beneath is astonishingly intact. The weave is fine, tight, and faintly aromatic, as if it once held herbs or spices. You don't open it, partly out of caution, and partly because you can't shake the feeling that you're being watched. That's when you notice the niches in the walls. There are dozens of them, each carved with precision, and in each rests an object. A jar, a tool, a carved bone, all preserved in the same perfect state. In one niche, a copper blade gleams faintly, its edge still sharp. In another, a scroll is rolled tight, its surface encrusted, but still bearing faint lines of ink beneath. You wonder how much of the past has been locked in here, waiting for the right pair of hands, or the wrong ones, to open it. You move carefully between the niches until you find one that's different. It holds not an object, but a small stone basin filled with something dark and glossy. You dip a fingertip in and find it thick, almost resinous. The scent is strange, earthy, smoky, and faintly sweet. A fringe theory says ancient people used resin pools like this to trap insects for ritual purposes, each tiny body a symbolic messenger to the gods. You quickly wipe your hand on your trousers. The far end of the chamber holds another surprise, a low archway leading into a tunnel that seems to shimmer. Stepping closer, you realize the walls here are almost entirely translucent. Thick panes of crystalline salt through which you can see blurred shadows of other passages beyond. The light from your torch refracts into soft rainbows, and for a moment, you forget the weight of the earth above you. You follow the shimmering tunnel until it curves sharply and ends at a sealed doorway. Stone, not salt, its surface carved with spirals and sunbursts. Around its edges, the salt has begun to creep like frost, sealing it even tighter. You run your hand over the carvings and feel a faint warmth radiating from the stone, as if something on the other side still remembers light. The air here is still, heavy with the scent of minerals and age. You stand for a long moment, wondering whether the doorway is meant to keep something in or keep you out. The warmth of the sealed doorway lingers on your palm as you turn away, following a side passage you almost missed. Narrow, angled downward, and framed by blocks of clay brick rather than carved stone. The bricks are baked hard, their surfaces etched with faint, almost eroded symbols. Historians still argue whether these marks were purely decorative or part of an ancient counting system. Either way, the craftsmanship is deliberate, each brick pressed perfectly into place. The air here is drier again, warmer, and tinged with the faint scent of ash. The tunnel leads you into a chamber unlike any you've seen so far. Its walls are lined with rows of life-size terracotta figures. They stand shoulder to shoulder in perfect formation, each one unique, different facial features, hairstyles, and armor details. Even in the dim light, the individuality is startling, as though each figure is the memory of a real person. You walk slowly between them, your footsteps unnervingly loud on the packed clay floor. A quirky tidbit you once read about a similar sight. Some of the figures had actual weapons, sharpened and ready, until looters made off with them centuries ago. Here, though, their hands are empty, frozen mid-grip as if awaiting orders. The ceiling is low and vaulted, supported by thick pillars of baked clay. Between each pillar, narrow alcoves hold smaller statues, children, musicians, and even animals. A clay dog stares up at you with an expression so alert you almost expect its tail to wag. You're halfway through smiling at it when you notice its eyes. Two tiny polished stones, still bright after all these years. Deeper in, the passage narrows again. The soldiers here are in worse shape, some missing heads, others leaning or cracked. The floor crunches underfoot, and you glance down to see shards of broken figures scattered like bones. Historians still debate whether these were damaged in some ancient collapse or deliberately destroyed in a ritual decommissioning. The air shifts suddenly, a faint breeze brushing your cheek. Down here, that means one thing: an opening ahead. You follow the draft into a large, circular chamber, its walls patterned with repeating spirals and concentric rings. At the center stands a raised platform, square and flat, surrounded by 4 kneeling clay figures facing inward. Their heads are bowed, their hands resting on the platform's edge. On top lies a slab of reddish stone, its surface worn smooth. A fringe theory claims such slabs were used as command tables for ritual war games, part strategy, part magic, part psychological training for the rulers. Standing here, you can almost imagine the general of this clay army leaning over the table, issuing silent orders to troops who never tire. You circle the platform and notice a small tunnel at ground level, barely high enough for you to crawl through. Against better judgment, you kneel and shine your torch inside. The beam falls on more figures, smaller, densely packed, their clay surfaces blackened as though they'd been through fire. It's claustrophobic just looking at them, and you decide not to test whether the tunnel can hold you. Instead, you turn toward another passage leading off from the chamber. This one feels different. The walls are smoother, and the floor is laid with flat clay tiles that clink softly under your boots. The air grows warmer with each step, and soon you hear it. The low, rhythmic thump of something deep ahead. Not machinery, not water, but the kind of sound you'd expect from a massive drum struck at long intervals. The passage ends in a tall doorway, its lintel carved with 2 opposing lines of soldiers meeting at the center. Beyond is a vast hall where the clay army continues, but here they're in motion. Not literally, but sculpted mid-step, spears angled, faces locked in determined grimaces. The craftsmanship is uncanny, the poses so dynamic you half expect to hear the clatter of their weapons. Along the far wall, a raised dais holds the largest figure yet, a towering clay king seated on a throne. His robes are textured to resemble heavy fabric, and in his right hand he clutches a staff topped with a sphere. The sphere glimmers faintly in your torchlight, though you can't tell whether it's polished stone or metal. A quirky note from an old excavation: similar spheres have been found containing hollow chambers, possibly for storing messages or ritual objects. The king's eyes are made of the same polished stone as the little dog's, and they seem to follow you as you move. You step up onto the dais, the clay tiles cool beneath your boots. From this vantage, the entire hall spreads before you, the silent army frozen mid-advance, waiting for a command that will never come. Behind the throne is another door, smaller and unadorned yet. You push it open to find a narrow stair spiraling downward. The air here is cooler, damp again, and you realize with a shiver that you're heading deeper into the earth, leaving the guardians behind. The thump you heard earlier fades, replaced by the faint sound of trickling water. At the bottom, the stairs end abruptly at an archway. Beyond it, the floor glistens wet, and a thin mist clings to the air. The light from your torch glances off something metallic in the distance, and you take a step forward, the clay army now just a memory at your back. The metallic glint draws you onward, your boots leaving damp prints on the slick stone floor. The air grows warmer with each step, and a faint rhythmic hiss begins to overlay the sound of trickling water, like someone opening and closing a massive set of bellows far away. Your torchlight stretches ahead and finally catches on shapes, pillars of blackened stone, each topped with shallow bowls that once held roaring fires. You've stepped into the furnaces of the undersmiths. The chamber is immense, its roof lost in shadow, but you can feel its height in the way the air moves, currents shifting with invisible drafts. Along the walls, alcoves hold the skeletal remains of forges, stone platforms, low troughs for quenching, and the warped outlines of molds long since abandoned. Historians still argue whether this was a purely functional industrial space, or if forging here was as much a ritual as a craft. Near one forge, you find the first real sign of life in centuries, a scatter of black slag under a thick crust of dust, still smelling faintly of burnt metal. A quirky tidbit you recall from a museum placard. Ancient smiths sometimes mixed bone ash into their alloys, believing it gave weapons the spirit of the dead. You try not to think too hard about what, or who, might have been used here. You walk deeper between the forges, noting the strange precision of the layout. The workstations are spaced evenly, each with a groove carved into the floor to channel away molten runoff. The grooves all lead toward a single channel running down the center of the hall, disappearing into a dark pit at the far end. You kneel beside it, shining your torch down. The walls of the channel are lined with a glossy black substance, not quite stone, not quite metal, that seems to drink in the light. Along the far wall, massive stone wheels rest on their sides, each carved with radial grooves. Whether they were grinding stones or some form of primitive mechanical gear, historians still debate. A fringe theory insists they were ceremonial sun wheels, turned only during solstice forges, when the alignment of the upper world matched some hidden calendar below. You spot the metallic glint again, this time at ground level. It's a spearhead, half buried in the dirt, its surface mottled with green patina. You dig it out and find the metal surprisingly intact, the edge still catching light. For a moment, you feel the weight of its history, how many hands have gripped it, how many battles it might have seen before finding its way down here. In one corner, you find a small side chamber. The air here is hotter, heavier, and the walls are streaked with red and orange where minerals have leached out from centuries of heat. On the floor lies a long, narrow stone trough. Inside is a layer of fine black sand, smooth except for a single line drawn through it, as if someone traced a finger across recently. The sand is warm. You pull your hand back quickly. Returning to the main hall, you notice a wide stair carved into the far wall, leading upward at a steep angle. The steps are worn but still solid, and as you climb, you pass a series of alcoves that each hold an object: a hammerhead, a pair of tongs, a fragment of chain. All are carefully positioned as if part of a display or an offering. At the top, the stairs emerge into a smaller chamber with a domed ceiling blackened by soot. Here, the forges must have burned hottest. The walls still radiate a faint warmth, as if the fire never fully left. In the center of the floor is a circular opening, its rim ringed with metal clamps. Peering down, you see nothing but darkness, though the air rising from it is hot enough to dry your skin. You circle the opening, noting the strange inscriptions carved into the metal rim: zigzag lines, concentric circles, and a repeated motif of a bird with outstretched wings. Historians still debate their meaning. Some say they represent heat and transformation. Others, that they're symbolic guardians of the forge's heart. One narrow passage leads away from the chamber, and you follow it, ducking under low stone beams. The air cools slightly, and the sound of dripping water returns, echoing in the dark. The passage twists and narrows until it opens into a gallery with a sheer drop beyond. You edge closer, and your torchlight reveals a chasm splitting the earth, its walls streaked with bands of mineral color, deep blues, greens, and coppery reds. Far below, water gleams in the dim light, and you see a stone ledge halfway down with something resting on it. A great anvil, its surface polished smooth. How it got there, you can't guess. A fringe theory claims such anvils were offerings to the earth, hurled into deep crevices when a forge's work was complete. The ledge is unreachable from here, and the chasm stretches beyond the torch's reach. You step back, the gallery floor solid but humming faintly underfoot, as if the mountain is vibrating. The hum follows you as you return to the forge hall, where the air now feels heavier, as though something has shifted since you first entered. At the far side of the hall, a narrow doorway waits. Beyond it, you catch a breath of cooler air and the faint scent of something older than fire, something that smells like sealed stone and memory. You step through the narrow doorway and into a tunnel where the air is suddenly still. No forge heat, no draft, just the dense quiet of something sealed for a very long time. Your torchlight glances off the walls, which are lined not with stone or clay, but with a pale, smooth material that almost looks like polished bone. Historians still argue whether it's a rare form of limestone or an intentional composite made from organic remains. Either way, it drinks up sound, and every step you take feels strangely muffled. The floor slopes gently downward, and the temperature drops with each step. You start to notice faint marks on the walls, repeated handprints, some small and delicate, others wide and long-fingered. They're pressed deep into the surface, as though whoever made them had pushed with impossible strength. A quirky tidbit you once heard from an archaeologist pops into your mind. In some ancient cultures, tomb walls were imprinted by mourners during the sealing ceremony as a final, permanent touch of the living to the resting place of the dead. The slope levels out, and the tunnel opens into a long, rectangular chamber. At first glance, it's empty. Then your eyes adjust, and you see it. The central sarcophagus, massive and seamless, carved from a single block of dark stone. The surface gleams faintly, reflecting your light in soft ripples. You approach slowly. The air around it feels different, as if it has weight. You catch yourself breathing shallowly without meaning to. A soft sound interrupts the stillness, a faint exhale, like the slow release of breath. You freeze. The sound stops. You tell yourself it's just air shifting through hidden vents, but some part of you knows better. Circling the sarcophagus, you find carvings along the base, scenes of boats sailing across dark, wavy lines, figures carrying torches, and finally, a depiction of the sarcophagus itself, surrounded by kneeling shapes. Historians still debate whether these are funeral processions or mythical journeys. One corner of the chamber holds a tall urn with a fitted lid. It's covered in a crystallized layer of something like salt, and when you brush a finger across it, the layer flakes away easily. Inside, you glimpse tightly folded cloth, perfectly preserved, its weave so fine it almost shimmers. A fringe theory suggests such cloth was meant to feed the spirit of the occupant, not by being worn, but by existing as an eternal luxury within reach. You move toward the far wall, where the smooth surface is interrupted by a narrow crack. A cool draft whispers through it, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. Pressing your ear against the gap, you think you hear something, perhaps water dripping, perhaps the low, steady pulse of air being drawn in and out. A sudden thought comes to you. The chamber is breathing. You pull back quickly and glance at the sarcophagus again, half expecting to see its lid shifted, but it remains perfectly sealed. Still, the impression lingers, the sense that the vault is not entirely inert. At the rear of the chamber, you find a set of low steps leading to a platform. From here, the entire room spreads before you, the sarcophagus at its center like a dark heart. You notice for the first time that the walls curve slightly inward at the top, creating a dome effect that focuses your voice when you speak. You test it with a whisper, and the sound comes back to you, just slightly altered, like an echo passed through someone else's mouth. On the platform is a stone basin filled with what looks like fine ash. You sift a bit between your fingers. It's cool and dry, but when you blow on it, it drifts in slow, spiraling patterns, as though reluctant to settle again. You crouch, noticing faint scratches on the floor near the platform. The pattern is odd, curved, intersecting lines that resemble both script and topography. Whether map or message, historians still haven't agreed. Your torchlight catches on something behind the platform, a narrow hatch set flush into the wall. It's sealed with a slab of the same pale material as the tunnel walls, and there's no visible handle. Only a small hole, perfectly round, punctures the center. You reach toward it, but a faint, warm draft escapes, curling around your wrist. The idea that there's more beyond this vault sends a shiver through you. The breathing sound, real or imagined, seems stronger now, syncing almost imperceptibly with your own. You step back, uneasy, but the cool draft from the crack in the wall tugs at you, promising a path deeper still. Finally, you turn toward a small archway on the opposite side of the chamber. It's half hidden behind a pillar, its threshold marked with a simple carved symbol, a spiral leading inward. You duck through, leaving the breathing vault behind, and the air instantly grows heavier again, tinged with a faint mineral tang. Ahead, the darkness feels thicker, as though you are about to step into the oldest part of this entire underworld. The archway swallows you into a tunnel so narrow you can feel your shoulders brush both walls. Your torchlight paints shifting shadows ahead, but they're absorbed quickly, leaving only a faint glow on the slick, mineral-streaked stone. The air here is still but dense, carrying the smell of wet earth and something sharper, like heated copper. Each breath feels older, as if you're inhaling the residue of centuries. You press on, stooping as the ceiling dips, until the passage widens abruptly into a cavern so vast your light fails to find the far walls. The floor slopes downward toward a central depression, and the sound here is different. A faint, constant hum, just at the edge of hearing, like the background note of the planet itself. Historians still argue whether such sounds are natural seismic resonance or evidence of ancient machinery buried deep within the crust. As you descend the slope, the glow begins. At first it's subtle, just a pale shimmer where the stone dips. But then the color shifts to a soft, bluish green, radiating from veins in the rock. They spiderweb out from the central depression, pulsing faintly, as though following some slow heartbeat. At the depression's center lies a pool, perfectly still, its surface mirroring the glow above and around it. You kneel at the edge, and the hum intensifies, not louder, but deeper, sinking into your bones. You dip a fingertip into the water, and it's warmer than you expect, with a slick, almost oily feel. The ripples radiate outward unnaturally slow, as if the water resists disturbance. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some ancient miners carried stones from singing caverns, believing they enhanced dreams and visions. Maybe this is where those stones came from. You stand and let your light travel across the far wall, where the glow is brightest. There, carved into the rock, are hundreds of concentric circles, some as small as a coin, others large enough to stand inside. In their centers are depressions where objects once sat, or still do. In 3 of them, smooth, metallic spheres rest untouched, gleaming faintly despite a coating of mineral crust. The air here feels neither hot nor cold, just charged, as though every particle is paying close attention. You realize your own breathing has slowed, matching the rhythm of the hum. On the cavern's eastern edge, a jagged fissure cuts into the wall, revealing stone layers in colors you've never seen in nature: deep violet, pale gold, streaks of iridescent green. A fringe theory suggests that such mineral bands are fossils of events, each recording a moment of catastrophic planetary change. You step closer to the fissure and place your palm against the rock. It's warm, and the hum deepens in response, a resonance so low you feel it more in your chest than in your ears. You pull back, and the hum softens again, as if acknowledging your departure. In the pool's reflection, you catch movement, a faint shadow passing high above. But when you look up, the ceiling is smooth, glowing faintly, with no sign of anything alive. The hum continues, steady, unbothered. You wander the cavern's perimeter, finding carved niches filled with objects, a broken copper circlet, a row of small clay jars sealed with wax, a flat stone slab incised with spirals that seem to spin if you stare too long. At the far side, you discover a narrow ledge overlooking a shaft that drops straight down into darkness. A warm updraft rises from it, scented faintly with sulfur and something almost sweet. You drop a small pebble and never hear it hit bottom. The hum seems to press closer now, and the glow brightens slightly. The pool at the center remains undisturbed, a mirror to a ceiling that looks more and more like a sky. You stand at the edge, feeling the weight of all the stone above, all the history behind, and all the unknown below. This is the chamber at the world's root, the place where human hands once worked, then retreated, leaving behind something that feels as if it has always been here, and always will be. The hum becomes a comfort now, not a warning, and your thoughts slow until they match its rhythm. The glow softens, the edges of the cavern blur, and you take one last deep breath before turning away, ready to carry the memory of this place back up through the tunnels, past the vault that breathes, past the forges and rivers and painted walls, back into the world above. Your steps grow slower, and the echoes fade until they're just a soft murmur behind you. The air warms gently as you move upward, carrying the scent of stone, a trace of metal, and the faintest whisper of the deep hum still pulsing somewhere far below. Each bend in the tunnel brings less darkness, until the black gives way to a softer, dreamlike shade. Your torch burns lower, its light blending with the memory of the cavern's glow. The walls here seem closer than before, not in a way that confines you, but in a way that feels almost protective. You pause now and then, resting a hand on the stone, feeling the stillness settle in your chest. It's a stillness that belongs to more than silence. It's the stillness of knowing you've walked in places that might never be seen again, and that those places now live quietly in your mind. The upward slope eases your steps. The air becomes lighter, cooler, almost fresh, as though the outside world is leaning closer. You keep moving, each breath carrying away a little more of the underground weight. When at last you glimpse the faint shimmer of daylight, or perhaps just the idea of it, you stop. You let your shoulders relax, your breath lengthen, and you listen one last time. The hum is gone now, or maybe it's simply settled so deep inside you that you can't tell where it ends, and you begin. You take the final steps without hurry, because there's no rush. The earth is still there, below you, holding its wonders in patient silence. And whenever you close your eyes, you know you can return.